Then the Panchen Rinpoche Nyamlen Chidandi, and then some Jatamji in the Sanyo Koban Tower Show, Sipi Chenju Sim in a dine, the Yukunia Lanche, Dangan Zakasi, the Chutim Yamleda, and those Jimmy Parsi Yamleda, Churim Yamle Shuvare, Chidanda Simja. So, the Longe, Kesoda Java, Tamche Shanlia, Tangi, and Big some of the Tachi, some of the Jayati, Jimbi Jayati, Lo Jayati, Comsiadi. Dinashi, Lunga Yusum Yokone, Shanla, Lipiki, Sivia, Sambas, that Zawadi, near Shanla, never Kinichi me, San Bigetta, Niger to Miati, Lunga Yusum, Niger to Mialaso, the Nigga Sutum Soya, all the magic dick. And the Jinyam Java Tarsim Payola, let me Jinny Labrochi, setting out to Kisiti Gorma Shusare.
Good evening. So we're continuing to look at the trainings that are unique to a practitioner of supreme capacity, a practitioner who's developed the determination to become a Buddha so as to alleviate or lead all beings to a state freed of suffering. And we're at the part of the training where, having generated bodhicitta, they now engage in the actual practices or trainings of a bodhisattva. We looked at the first two of the 6 perfections last week, the first being that of generosity, which is where one cultivates the wish to give. And then secondly, we looked at that of ethical restraint, where one is determined not to harm others through one's physical actions, verbal communication, or even way of thinking. Moreover, the bodhisattva commits to developing or cultivating these attitudes, for example, generosity and ethical restraint, to the point of perfection, training their mind in these ways to the point where it cannot be developed any further. Tonight we'll continue with the 103rd verse, that of patience.
Adinma dosungda kamsum kigo malu chuyurde xie sangzhu dixin soje yang mijuk nyelan pemba dubjibe sube phajin zoba jinyi lo sai.
103rd verse. Please bless me to complete the perfection of patience by not getting upset whenever any being of the 3 realms becomes angry at me, abuses, criticizes, threatens, or even kills me. Instead, may I help them in response to their harm.
and Pasuli Pa Never give it to the landlord, some of them, Makoaja, Koromalawa, the Negas and Matawaja, and Kloshi to Vaina, Della, and Seva Compasi Gorua.
Training in patience is training one's mind so that no matter how others relate to us, whether they harm us or speak to us in a harsh manner, our mind stays undisturbed, and thereby we do not respond in a manner similar to how they are relating to us.
Rangi Zawashu just a Semje nada, Buina, Suzuki Naduki, Semje nada, Tajiki Buinada, Suzupe, which is a Zawachis Yovena, Digi Dursi Buina, Chikanzulia, Chiki Namutuk Jotada, Tiktuk Jalaya, Chevena, Amagilamsa, or the Chik Sem Kombalamsa, Pudlo Konlang Marwa, Sem Seva Shakayama, or the Puhurandini. Chikaya Masambache and some motto to Guru. Dina Sosuki bed, Ching the Minchevache Saki, Sosuki Simjan in a Diziaji Kira, Jesuchi Kira Javana, or Lamsan Koromalawache, and to Guru, Dilla Servicigura. Then I didn't remember round how should I made against do to the Gablia Kiru up Kira, General Lamsan or the key said, and Jolaya da Mishanda getting a kira, Japsona, Atisha, or she was simply Lamsa Assembly, Chik Tutua, Ungurua. This is the 11 Soko Matubarava. Just so combat city on the bill, Masona, so Sugi, Kao, Zivi, Budi, Gijo Gada, Dinachina, Sosolia, Simajo, Koramala, the new and the castle, or Gemasha chair, or the Gemasha Ligua, Mado, and the Konolayada, the Ligoma, just the Nij, Tushi, Dutudua, the Nijil Servasigo, the Servasia Dinchilagura, just a Mishan, Sosolia, Sukadishina, Dinigi, Nevada, Singamba, the Dinishi, the Nigis, Tushi, Setuba, Simatua, Tushi, Dutubana, the Servo Comba Sigurua.
To understand or to relate to this mind of patience, we can take some illustrations. For example, because the mind of patience depends, the mind of patience arises in dependence on or in relation to our relationship with the being with whom we are interacting. So, for example, if it's our household pet, that is a dog or a cat or an animal that one loves greatly, has a close and tender feeling for. So should, for example, if it's a dog, the dog starts to bark at a noise that it's heard. Our reaction to our pet barking is so different than if it's a neighbor's pet barking once again. So we can see that there is likely to be a different response arising within us from a similar cause, a barking dog. What differs in terms of our response is that we recognize it to be our dog, and therefore our mind is more spacious and calm, responds differently, perhaps with curiosity. I wonder why the dog is barking. And similarly, the way a parent responds to their child speaking to them in a harsh manner, or someone else talking to them in a harsh manner, using the same words, facial expression, tone, and so forth. The parent is much more likely to be open and accepting of their child, perhaps even thinking the child doesn't really mean it, they're having a hard day. Whereas with someone else, because the relationship is different, the response that innately arises, automatically arises, is going to be quite different.
Dine za dinaje that sem machu ba de de le so ba se za dinade de le ya manzu lo jang de ka la kar chos ne kham sum ji go ma lu chö gyur de xie xian sang chang zhu di xing so jue yang se de da gan je le da gan je mi ji ni da ka xie ji so su ne ba ji ba ne da so ba kom ye yin de so kom tu ye yin de kom go ko re ma se da sem jan kham sum ji ro 되비 감기 미당 샘젠 눈도 간에서 차상 소설야 배 소설야 배지 셰셰 다야다 안에 녀바기야다 소설의 예동 다야 되는 제외나라 되는게 되비 감 아니 샘젠다 미다 샘젠 차상 또 수감기 샘젠 가 샘젠 강사 차상 수매칸이 가서 감숨기 기부 샘젠 같으시다 차상기 창미기 소소 지불이야 소소 지불샤자 차상에서 소소야 안에 좀谢谢 다야다 안这个창조제야다 뇌견제야다 배지 예동 다야라 되네게 소줘야게 되는 제베네 남델이야 셈 맞추고제 배 쇠버 공부해서 맞추고제 셈리시 되도 바제 우리에서 지금 미주 가서 감숨 끼고 말을 최결대 배 공라사제 공배 공라사제 땡아서야 谢谢 다야 안 창조제야 안에 번 딕션에 내라다야 되네게 소소게 지게 소줘야가 되는 제베네 미축세다 되네게 말씀 맞추고제 셈러시 제파 코로 말아와제 콜리아 체위게 렌로기 선배 삼로 맞게와제 러시 지게 되고 그래서 되네게 되되더라 안에 지서 보고 말 되네 공부를 해야지.
The meaning of a patient mind is expressed for us in English. In the old translation, it's in the, in the second line, by not getting upset. And in the newer translation, and in the third line, not to be agitated. So these are different ways to say that the mind remains undisturbed. in the face of adversity. And that adversity then is presented in the first two lines of Tibetan, which in English is in our second line of the old translation. Whenever any being of the three realms becomes angry at me, abuses, criticizes, threatens, or even kills me. Or in the newer translation, should even all the beings of the three realms, without exception, become angry at me, humiliate, criticize, threaten, or even kill me. The meaning then of these first two lines is no matter which being, groups of beings, or even every being without exception throughout all the realms of samsara, should they, and no matter what they do to me, whether they threaten me, they intimidate me, they harm me or scold me, criticize me, whatever they do, my mind needs to stay undisturbed. No matter what is going on for them, if their mind is overwhelmed by anger or any other affliction, and no matter how many beings or whom they are or how they relate to me, the mind of patience remains undisturbed.
Dale dele she shin se she dang so she la ne cik zu du xia ji gyun ju ji cik zu bu dang du xia la ba de la she shin se ra da chang zhu la ne da kyang gyun de ne so kyang de de ji du kyang de ne du a sen gyun mong bu kyang de gu ma ji kyang jia sen xi du kyang sen de ko gyun jian ya su dun ba de le chang zhu a se wo de chang zhu a da dik shin se ba da xu ba ne da dang wa dong wa de le dik shin sa 다 소처바 세디바 단고 소처바 시수라 소처바 디수라 디자 데네 이제 데네 제베나 간데 제베나 다 구서고 공부해시데 당한저 가르용으로서네 아즈네 베네 시시다나 세보검 투바체 에네 성부의 교제 교환 되는 지기도 교환 되는 지기도 교환 먹고 되네 아 세보검 마토야 용식이 응구로와 야 데네기 시시다의 교인을 주는 세보검 되네 녀다다나 근데 양 어디 곰 세보검 마토야 응구로와 안 딜레 녀다다 세보검나 다 교환 수익인 랍네 다 쇠네다다 균에 지금 말씀 비게 양파 렌로긴 세베스와 고모도바 연구로와 지사 데네기 지교마다 간데 신내다 시시다마이나다 창주와 수수기 균주에 균데네데네 두선데 균세된 제바이나다 안 소소냐 녀다단 제바이나다 안 소소기 탐말이야 소제바이네야 델야 셈마투바제 안에 코로말라시 되고 그래서 내 세비념네 두시하고 그래서
So in terms of the beings who may harm us, what we have in the newer translation is more accurate. Any being without exception, or all beings without exception. So whether one imagines each and every being, or just groups or singular, it's every being without exception. And in terms of how they may harm us, then we have different words: abuse, criticize, threaten, or even kill. When the new translation, humiliate, criticize, threaten, or even kill. So the first word, abuse or humiliate, more commonly it's the word for scold. So this we would understand if beings were to speak to us in a harsh manner. Our mind needs to remain undisturbed. This is the patient response, or the practice of patience. Is our mind staying undisturbed even when people scold us, speak to us harshly. So that's the meaning of abuse. The second word, criticize. So this is where we are criticized. Someone's wagging their finger at us, they're exposing our faults. So here this is particularly personal, things that we perhaps have done wrong. And here too, the patient response is a mind that is undisturbed. The third term, threaten, can also understand this as to be intimidated. So if someone is threatening us or trying to intimidate us, the patient response is a mind that is undisturbed. And training in these varying ways, and even if our very life is in danger, our mind too stays undisturbed.
Nadine, Sevokum Tuyedi, Anzolina, the Tuscali Horua, Lamsa, Yumar, Demi, Janshi Sembata, and Janshi Semba Papa, Janshi Sembi, Tesula, and Dusin Yamneji, J2 or whatever. Carson Gondu, Dusine, Subigi, Yamnam Comjene, Lord Mason, Jangdor Chene, Yamnen, Jangdor Cheva, Jangdor Che, Jangba Chava in the, and it didn't come to Warwa, Sheshe, the Sanjuata, and Deepata, Socheva in air, and the Konomalachi Palia, and Sevokum to Gore. Then also in the Shevata, in the Sandun. Test the Shetana, and Sevokum de Mantana, and Sevokumato in Gurua, just Sandriata, Dinigi, Lamsang and Kabuchi, Ansel in the Kabura. That is me, Janjusim be Yamlendi, Persian to get Janjusim, San, Yamlendi, Jehendige, Lucene, and it Sevokum to go or what.
We all have experience of how difficult it can be to remain undisturbed in the face of adversity, like in these situations just presented. As one trains, though, one sees that one's limit, that becomes expanded, and we can take more with a mind that is less disturbed. And eventually, we'll be able to practice like the bodhisattvas, where the ordinary, or certainly the Arya bodhisattvas, for whom their mind will stay undisturbed. And why is that so? Because of their extensive training both in patience and its preceding meditations. Therefore, whatever they encounter, they are skilled in remaining undisturbed.
소소 강변 소소 지구 유리 갑리아 안 된지게 소소게 생기 소소리아 소소 륜디와 미직이 소소리아 기지 견제제의 시시다다 안 창조 제한다 내내게 예배 멀바시제 되는 시에된 될이야 안 직서와 검제 셈마초바시 저거 검제 마초바시 되투에도 시에 당이 당보 코로나다 Shengyingale Shisha Tawada, Sangjuada, and Dibada, Kissi Sochevene, Nipa, and Chigi, Semmatovich, Koromalawa, Semmatovich, Tutovich, Sempike, Samlodinga to do Stanwood, Samta, Lucina Samtane, and Denigi, Shengi, and Sosolia, Tutu Chevarovich, Denegi, Chiki. Sosuke Samlonalia, Nawalia, Denis Sueche, Jingala Tizush, Chiki Shigio Baro, Chik, Nulacom, and Delia so Sematua and Dushin Machupache, Koromalache, Dutuba, and Dushin some danger, Chik, Nazuki, Dushe, Chandurchevina, and Gilligilicene, Yargitoya, Chegorova.
For us, to expand our limits of how we can respond patiently, or to what we can respond with patience, this entails us becoming more habituated to the mind of patience. The way to develop the mind of patience then is when we alone at home, we are home alone, and we sit quietly and recall situations where a patient response was required, where our mind did get disturbed. And we recall that, and we generate or think about a more skillful response that we could have generated, using our wealth of Dharma knowledge to remind ourselves of how we could have responded more skillfully, starting out with smaller slights, receiving smaller levels of aggression, and repeatedly reflecting on these situations, and then slowly progressing to those which we find more challenging. In this way, then, we're developing the habituation to a skillful way to respond to harmful situations by deepening our practice of patience through relying on our Dharma knowledge. So, for example, we think of times that people have acted towards us in a harmful way, as well as also ways that haven't happened, but who knows, maybe they will. For example, if someone were to openly discuss or openly reveal our hidden faults, the side of our personality we keep more to ourselves, how we would deal with that. And in this way, by training our mind, when we actually encounter those situations, we will be able to deal with them skillfully.
Gongda Diwana Sugar some Davine, Tanga Pichi Lagato, depending on the Lagato Saki, that dinner Coche Pombotiki, Sosolia, Denikaji, Lega Tata Chick Minusiada, and Chick Minusiada, Dene Kunjura Chick Tush and the Chavena, Nipa Korlang me as and Peggy, Tuchi Korlam Langje, some much watch to the Korlang me as and Peggy, Dating on to be Tushin, some of the do some diet, Yanzi Lega to do, and the Lega Lerodang. And the one, Yang me, Chiki, Nambu to Jatuya, Tsitsubula, the Niki Kunjur Jena, Delia Pakolang me ass and beggy, the Niki made this same much with Jutava Chiki in Sebi, the thing understood in the summer danger, draw in and the Niki, Gensam Delia, and draw with Kesi, the Niki, Nisu Chuvaina, Dick Captele, and Subacom to Yaki, Carat and the Ngore. The names that are not in Yelena, the Niki Lega in the Madron Yelena, some Pemba Nasi, the Niki Subacombi, the Niki Japan pass Contalang me, and some much over Jutava Chikins and Big Subacom to Chikins and be some Roshita, and the Yellow Dushka, then some dance Jovaina, and Geshe the Niki Nesu. Chevaina and Jumaina, Delia Subacom to be Cabaringori. The names I think as near some Matavaina could Deliandic Subacom to editors Galaka, which is a dinner and yell and dosed in some tavern. Another day, Bejichimushu chicken in Elia, Mima Mashiva to Matum Mashiva to and Jim in the Lagama Woyungruada, the names that Delia do some bad best Kishimuchagua, Bejichimu Chagora.
The first way then to train is to recall past events. The second way to train is in the same situation, when quiet at home, is to think about likely future events. So again, the first way of training was actual past events, now likely future events, where you think about whom you're likely to encounter today, in what situations you're going to what situations you are going to encounter today, and therefore having an idea of what adverse circumstances one is likely to meet today, prepare oneself. I know what kind of relationship I have with this person and with that person, so I know just hearing their voice, seeing their face, or knowing that our time to meet is approaching, what response I'm likely to have. Or I'm likely to be in a particular circumstance. I often find that triggering. How to deal with it. And in this way, we prepare ourselves through being aware of what we're likely to encounter, and then spend some time preparing how to respond skillfully, how to understand the situation so that our afflictions don't arise, or should they start to arise, we can quickly and effectively deal with them. So we prepare well like this. Then, as we're going about our day, we remind ourselves of our meditation that morning. And as we approach a situation where we know we are likely to experience adverse circumstances, we then prepare ourselves by reminding ourselves of the meditation that morning. Today I was going to have a meeting with my boss. I know it often doesn't go well. This was my meditation. Now I'm prepared to deal with them. And thereafter, afterwards, rejoice in the level of success one attained. In this way, seeing one's progress, seeing one's development, and it's thereby so much easier to continue training in this way. Because in order to engage in this or any meditation repeatedly over a sustained period, one needs to have the benefits vividly clear, the benefits or the purpose of the meditation vividly clear. Then it's much easier to engage in these meditations repeatedly. And to the extent that one's trained one's mind, it becomes ever easier to deal with adverse circumstances. It's more difficult if one hasn't trained much, but if one is well prepared, then one can have experience real success. And your lives are busy. You meet many people, and you often are in a variety of circumstances. Therefore, there's great benefit. It's of great use and extreme importance to do this meditation.
미션다게 어디 미디디 지가 전한 가이면도 배우고 버려서 그 렌게 코트가 갑도 쪼투면도 로면도 전하면도 선배기 미디니기 삼그리 시그리 삼제 미디네 삼그리 미디니게 배 간저 통전 땅그래 선배기 나서 삼는 알이야 데니기 토네 아니 현알이전 남사 데니 간저기 직배 갑도 줘야다 소소게 강투지하게 되는 용도와 지나디 미션다 가르삼베네 통중 땅 가서 그래 전규 민도 아니 신민 삼베네 땡가 전삼 나저기도 딕도야래 노트샤이마 데네게 만저기 콘로 말아제 파서버 검투에 되려 전나메 바다 마리바이나 전주선 바다 사이에 찾아 마리바래 로하다 제산 디 마리바 차고 말에 제산디 간저디 삼당고 말에 삼당고 말에 되네래 양 서버 공구에서는 미션다지 가서 구마를 개변에 휴구마 개변에 생각도 나인 주변에 서부 공고거래대 서부 검세디 코로 말랑식으로 파 코로 말랑 코파 네베 삼바기교 말해서 디기교 말해서 서부 말랑식으로 내려야 서부 디 말랑마 잡고래서 서부 검지식으로 마도 양 될야 내 구마 개변에다 매일 김전 디레서 결혼가 구마래서 결혼가 빵다 가려서 소식이 맨비기야 템버시시제디 곧 렌제들 곧 템바다 디자체체다 파 갑데 렌셰디 디셰추고래 마도야 서보검세네 아간나 구마잡셰 교구샤라네 다가랑 렌마제 인도도르체 되었는데 소소경을 그러와 디마시고 다 서보검세디 파 콘라교 말해서 제파 네베 삼바기교 말해서 다 셈모추바시 되고래 디세고래 마도 대려야 전에 구마 구셔 그 되는 제시랍나 니 구마 구바 말에 셈마초 코로 말아와세 누이니 수이 토네 맞지 구마 마인바도 겸체나 세세제야디 맞지 템바 텐두제야디 술이야 지pombol야 시와나 직침제나 디제야디 지초월 지고고마도 디디고 말야디 바라들 세보검시데 차사마저 경경야 계려서 삼로지 코로나디 노트를 뜻단 말에 다다 말에
A good starting point is to be aware of how we currently respond to adverse circumstances, especially from interactions with others. So as to notice that, if we look at the final line, we all too often respond to their harm in an afflicted manner, perhaps in a similar way to how they are interacting with us. But even if it's not the same, it will still be afflicted. So be aware of this. How readily, for example, if someone criticizes us or falsely accuses us of something or blames us for something that we perhaps did do, what arises in our mind? All too often, it's a mind of aggression, where we may well respond in a similar kind, or a mind of pride. How can they speak to me like this? Or a mind that looks down on them. They're so stupid. How could they think like this? So this way of responding on a mental level is all too common. And if one is not taking care of one's mind, it is very likely that one will respond in kind. So therefore, in one's training, one first recognizes where one is, and then engages in the meditation, thinking that no matter what is done towards me, as expressed in this verse, whomever they are, or whatever they do, anger is never justified. It serves no purpose. It causes me to suffer, obscures my wisdom, and therefore I cannot respond skillfully. So anger is never justified. Moreover, that I will encounter circumstances where people interact with me in an unwanted way is to be expected. If even faultless beings such as the Buddha has people like, falsely accuse them of things, get angry at them and so forth. And of course, for someone such as myself, this will happen. Therefore, there's no need for surprise, there's no need to take exception, and there's certainly no need for anger. Then moreover, then one uses, as mentioned earlier, actual situations, or made-up situations, looking at the past, looking at the future, and thinking of, let's say I'm falsely accused of something, and maybe something with quite some consequences. I'm falsely accused of stealing something, and I'm being told I'll be reported to the authorities. So I will encounter many hardships from this beyond this one interaction. How to respond? So firstly, as I've just reflected, anger serves no purpose, nor does any other affliction. Don't look down on the person, don't be angry with the person, don't wonder how can this happen to me. Rather, understand that they are responding or acting under way perhaps of their afflictions, perhaps out of ignorance, perhaps out of anger. So therefore, they are mistaken. That's okay. I can now rather, with my calm mind, respond in a way that's polite and clear and explaining what the actual situation was. Perhaps I wasn't there and there's someone else who can provide an alibi, or giving some other explanation, or offering that one's home can be searched, but saying very, very politely, very clearly, giving one's explanation in a way that's calm and gentle and free of afflictions. And then moreover, afterwards, to guard one's mind from running over the situation, or having the situation going around in one's mind, repeating it again and again, this rumination. This too serves no benefit. This too is not a mind of patience, where one is now afflicted, recalling what happened. Rather let it go and move on.
Andine maje anga jugi chik zöwaro chik des nga zulia mi shengi da chik gyunjue ra che gyun chi anga zu pa gyun chik che de pa gyun sang che pa ki xie wa ya cha de ga bla khoro sana so so khoro sana nen pani nga zu rigba di pani gi che xie de ya 딱다 되는 시험을 선비기 리버디 딱다 레트고 막 추주고 이제 콘로사도 되는 콘로 휴긴데 간에 바다 말을 합시 쉬어는 안 되는 거는 너도 차야게 냥아치 못 차고 콘로 마사와제 심플리시 제 콘로 마사 심플리시 되지는 페니 라이들 어때는 라고도 선비게 콘로 리버디 파제도 되네 콜파 김진 딱다 시트야 돼 차야 돼 콘로 마사 바이나 심플리시도 세고 검토 바이나 디 고심 리버디 파 맞아 시에고야디 리버디 중부차 디기 아니 제바체 시에고야디 제도 페니기 렌 제베데 렌 딱딱지데 야고치 겹도 그래서 거의 김전에 야고시에도 그래 제래 근데 이제 콘로사와는 셈2진데 데니기 셈2어도 아니 가는 봐 콘로나를 가주 마주 지지지 가주 마주 랍진 데네 페니 아니 김전시에 딱딱 차마토 바다 데네 소슬이야 노르쇼야게 한 지기 용고레스 지다 데네자 곧 저와 제비기 가비는 거 찍지네 소소 가지래 맞아 코로 맞아 서고 검토해야지 예침보로시 쇼차고래서 대승도와.
In the context of patience, it's imperative to be clear that anger serves no purpose. Recall when people have given one a hard time, role play the situation, whatever it may be, and being aware that when anger does arise, it serves to overwhelm our intelligence, our wisdom, serving to make it more difficult for us to respond both skillfully as well as clearly. Thereafter, we may, a while later, when we've calmed down, think of something better to say, and what would have been a better response, a more skillful response. So therefore, to the extent that one is patient, one's intelligence will be accessible, and thereby one can respond skillfully and clearly and have a far better chance of resolving the situation. Whereas responding with anger, our intelligence is overwhelmed and the situation will escalate.
다 되네 미축제 다 뇌린 펜버 줍치비스 뇌린 펜버 줍치비스 지자다 신기 소소려 뇌버 제비갑라 뇌버 집에 니렌리야 소수기 펜버 두고리 해제다 다 되네 가르스 두고라스나 가르스게 대 신기 소소시알야 가르스리아 도스 뇌버제 강아데 지도 가르삼고 상가도 코너 말아와죠 코너 라인게 잡려야 인제 선배 파죠 인죠 다 소수기 균 매버 찍려 소신기 소수를 균제 제하다 지수 제하다 안 소소 지 동대 제하라 되는 연구원 대리야 인제 선배 인지 공고를 해제래 제가 추 네버 지거다 추 네버 지도 파래 녀는 지 코로나지 파 쉬바데 되는 네베 랄라 네버 차고 네베 렌게 거래 다 추 네버 지도 갑려 대리야 인제 선배 서버kom제 서버kom바이나 아니 그 서버kom 아니 닝제 공바이나 네베 렌딜이야 펜비 잡아두고 제상 코로나리아 펜비 닝제 선배서 닝제다고 내가 하모관에서 하모관되는 닝제 선배 닝제 군에나데 아니 코로나리아 템퍼레처 세시로 가라가라 지구에는 되네되네 말에다 되네되네 레다서 세시셰베는 그 닝제 원게 코 펜비 섬 두실이야도 네베 렌딜 펜비 렌지 파 렌자고 제가 네네 펜버 두시베스 되네기 펜버 두고 펜비 렌자고 그래서
Continuing with the third line, or for us, let's see, at the fourth line in the old translation and in the newer translation, also the final line. This then is making the point that instead of becoming, with the mind, instead of the mind being disturbed and responding in kind, one needs to rather respond in a way that's helpful or beneficial. So rather than responding in kind, one should respond in a way that holds their welfare as paramount. And thereby, if someone criticizes one or scolds one or blames one, or however that interact to one, with a motivation of compassion, we should respond to them. This is the way a practitioner of patience will respond. With compassion.
다데니기요 니제 검야다 안델리아 니제 삼다 델리아 펜바이 삼다베는 니필란라는 펜베 주시베스 데니기 냠네 쇠베 파친 도 버진 유로진 데니기 쇠베 냠렌제 탈친바 용화디 라메진 일라브로지 사데 데니 파친 도 버진 유로사디 송고로와
And the verse concludes with what we have in the first line, please bless me to complete the perfection of patience. Here we're asking for blessings, that not only are we successful in our training of patience, but that we develop our skills to the point of perfection. In other words, we complete our training.
Nöbale Jimani Seba Sada, Dunga Danlingi Seba Sada, Cholange Simple Seba said the Subigi Yawal Masuna Sumshigurwa. That the Delangus shared, Nöbale Jimani Seba Kom Dashigor, Garson comes from Yamalu Simjantamjig Ralaya, and the Sheva, Sangtua, Diba, Sojo, the Nekatachevina, Delia Sematua Seba Comgores, Delia and Pa. Lelia, Jambuze, Nijikom, Diton and Gron to Lucian, Pembe, Yan, Casalan or such a son dirty that nobody Jimmy Big, Seba said, all those chene, and that didn't was soon did.
Of the three types of patience, the patience of disregarding harm from others, the patience of willingly accepting hardship, and the patience with respect to practicing the Dharma. This verse explicitly refers to that first type, the patience of disregarding harm from others. And rather, in brief, the practice of patience enables one to respond with love and compassion for this afflicted being that is acting in an afflicted manner towards oneself, holding them within oneself, holding them within one's heart, with a tender and caring attitude. In this way, one responds.
Dunga Seba said, Dunga Seba said, Danga Shenlia, Pembe Jawaji Shenley, Robert Chedu Kablea, Ajig Ganga Mambotea Jungurua, Denigi, Denigi, that chicken, Sosugi, that Subina Kaleka, Odanga Kaleka, that the Jetu Samaras and Big Kaleka doing the same Shumba Leadu, Denigi Shasha in Yayorwa, and Pene. Denigi shall raw chippy couple in the Dunga Tayor, and Yachi Suzuki, Chökyi Gyaltsen, and Supona, Nayo, same other Busso, that thing I do some American should say, Nyashasha in Yayorwa, Denisa Della Dunga Tando Limbusuba, said Delia Dunga to get talent, you would say. She's a shelly a pemby to you that Dene Galilo, Dene some time to go, and the God or that Dene shelly a pember to a young done, Sachimbo Shuchi, shelly pember doing on Janjusim being Yamne, Sanjay and Janjusim bottom just shell a pember to Yamen stored. Tanga the negate Cobra, Bay, Yawures, Desanga Ganlek, Katu, and Ganga did a Gagush messing. Deleting a Denigi Cobra, Galekazi and Gale capture Robert Chicken Sempi, some died, Duma Darling Super. And then I Suzuki Chun Yamne Jella, and Jiganzu did Chusua Rodu and Jik Chabe, Gangare, Lamgares, Gangares, Biget, and the men being also come Jada, didn't do the couple, Adike, or that Super Nagado Gangado said, Denigi was Denigi Gangan, Denigi Yamne Jell, some died again. Bendigo Comia, Serving Yamne, Ninja Comiare, Nanzi Chamse Comiare, Chanshu Sem Comia, Dulce in the Combi Cable, Denigi Garden, Denigi Yamne Jed, Shintunu Combo Shureta, Sonetane, Nanzugi, Zemlin and Denigi Combo Shure, Sanget and Chanshu Sem Batamjig, Denigi Yamne Jin, the Sanyuko Watobari, Dunga Tata, the Drovale, Denigi Yamne in the drone model, Denigi, Denigi Yamne Jokopne, Daddy. Manzuki, Dunga, Tada, the Gun, Tamje, the Ten, Sanjo Copan to Utinese, Denisi Yamne, Bay, Aporeta, that Denisinger, Kalegas, Sugaze, Kale, and Kaleki, Sempi, Semna Kanga, Chena, Sugan, the Denetikanga, Dingikanga, imagine the Tabminus Kangas and the day, Nikanga, the Lueta, the Yamne Chicken, Sempi, some Tavena, that is on Dunga Tando Limbo Service. I think it Dunga Tando Limbo Service.
As just mentioned, the verse explicitly is about the first type of patience, that of disregarding harm from others. And the second type of patience is a patience of willingly accepting hardship. So this refers to hardships that arise from within oneself. The first type was hardship that arises from outside of us, from other people. This refers to hardships that arise within us, either physical or mental, in particular when engaging in virtue. So when we are acting out our Dharma practice, and we are, for example, we are helping others, engaging in beneficial activities, and our body becomes tired, our body starts to ache. From this hardship, this physical hardship, it's all too possible one may think, oh, this is too difficult. I can't continue like this. And one's mind becomes weak, thinking, this is beyond me. So here, we need to remind ourselves of how truly fortunate we are to have this opportunity to be able to engage in these activities that directly or indirectly benefit others. That we can ease the suffering of others. Moreover, by regenerating a wholesome attitude, I'm creating incredible causes that will lead to my attainment of Buddhahood. And therefore, no matter what comes my way, I will deal with it skillfully and not allow it to overwhelm me, leading me to become dispirited or giving up. Moreover, so those illustrations were specifically to deal with inner hardships relating to arising from our body, and those arising from our mind could come from difficulties in terms of going to teachings, such as in difficult weather, or when meditating on the teachings, where we think, oh, my mind is not changing so quickly, I'm struggling to understand this, or these kinds of inner obstacles that arise. Here too, we remind ourselves what a rare opportunity we have to hear the teachings, how truly fortunate we are to be able to reflect on these teachings, to have the mental capacity and the other favorable circumstances that are required. So few have this opportunity. And even those who recognize what a wonderful opportunity this would be, there are very few who have the opportunity like I do. Therefore, I can deal with this. I can transform it and not allow it to overwhelm me. So these are illustrations of dealing with inner turmoil and having one's mind remaining undisturbed, whether that inner turmoil arises from one's body or from one's way of thinking. The practice of patience means one's mind stays undisturbed in the face of this adversity.
Jesa dini inza dunga dangdu lembe sheba sida kanga katse nangi chigi kanga dile pa donglen chigi sempige ta kanga katse na chigi siba kanga dile mazemba dile zimgi me sempige samda de dunga dangdu lemba sa jro dengi chigi kale kana katse kana chigi sa dunga dangdu lemba sa jisi ora da ko china dunga ge.
So again, the second type of patience that of willingly accepting hardship is to recognize that one can deal with this. It doesn't need to overwhelm one. Have the inner confidence that, based on our training, I can deal with what is arising, I can transform it, it doesn't need to suppress me, overwhelm me.
Da chola ngesi myesi ngebar simpe seba sedu da chö bene chöle ya de bene gonjo somgi yende chi tong gonjo somgi yende tong ya da ane jam ni ji yube pando yoba yende tong da sangye da jaju sem gombe gi yende tong jinbe nyamle gi yende tong da chuju nyamle ji yende chuju nyamle ji de yende dene zo swebe nyamle ji de yende dene gi yende tong ji de dene gi tong ji bene jaju sem gomya da jam ni ji gomya gi gomba jam ni ji gomba na rang dewa shen dewa jan sem jam ni ji gomba la dene la sam ji tu de la de jaju sem ji tu de la de na sa yo gomba top tu je ning ji ji ba jam ni ji sem gomya be ma se shi hu ji ge chim bo za chim bo shu shi de wa sem be yuan den tong ji ne an de ni gi jam ni ji gi yuan den tong je de ni gi yuan den tong je jam ni ji de ya ne ya do gom gi sem be gi sam lo da de la ta che la nge sim se ba su ben 디나 지 권조 숨기 연대 통제 권조 숨기 연대 통 아니 니 아니 야네 점도 지긴 세 받아 아니 잔조 숨기 연대 통에 잔조 숨배 되네 이제 산조 고보 도비교 라진 이가라 판도 규되네 시도 지나 잔조 숨도 마음도 지금 잔수니 공기습에 야네 야도 공기습에 삼다야 돼 철라 예스미 세 봐서 최기 연된 이 대수기 연된디기 방해번 예제 아니 니 아니 냠는 제기 선배 야네 삼다야 될 지기스 삼다야 될라 다디 철랑에 스미스 바시고.
The third type of patience is that of the patience of conviction with respect to the Dharma. This then is applied where one has come to recognize the good qualities or the benefits of the varying practices within the Dharma. For example, the good qualities of the three jewels, the good qualities of generating love and compassion, because these will lead to the generation of the altruistic attitude in bodhicitta itself. The good qualities of bodhicitta in that is the doorway to the Mahayana and the attainment eventually of enlightenment, as well as looking at, for example, the good qualities of the various practices of a bodhisattva, such as generosity, ethical restraint, patience, and so forth. Recognizing these good qualities leads to a determination to cultivate them within oneself, to generate them, give rise to them, and have them abide and pervade one's own mind. So here, one has developed a conviction with regard to the qualities, the varying qualities of the Dharma, and one then is patient or has the mind that stays calm and undisturbed whilst ensuring one engages in repeated cultivation of knowledge and meditation based on that knowledge, and thereby is able to engage in meditation repeatedly over a sustained period. So to express this again, in order to be able to cultivate good qualities within oneself, qualities of the Dharma. One needs to understand them and give rise thereby to a wish to have those qualities within. And then one needs to train one's mind repeatedly over a sustained period and be patient with the hardships that one will encounter.
Penang Jugedan, Chinga, never charge nayo do, Tanga Juge, Sobo Commodon, same to Nagidu, Tanga Karchigore, Tanga Taya Medu, some picking Hakangadu, some something, same true, Semlia, Makivada, Denigi, and the Chikazam Jilia, and Be Denigi, some Pusutopata, never can say Chomyalogy Hudua, the Rashika Yungu, in the Negi, come with Kangalia Sergeant, my Chomi Shido, and the Yungore, Dinganzu, me, Tonyo, the Konyo, Mangu, the Neza, the Sevacom to go Maro, Tangan to the nation, that's it, Tang, so never Chimbicablia, Dunga down to Limbe Seva said, oh, that thing and Nadi. Kiawanga make a lady table, Gusa Savaje, Kayama, that you table the Mingores. Tisan Gusa Savanza, Jebudi, Gedina, Nemji, Mia, Mado, my member your Mars, Chick Nimich Mia, that Nale Mishaban, Jema, Jebud Mingmaka, Dunga Yongo Mare, that thing I Jebud Mishaban, Dunga, the Jebud Mingortanga, the Jebud Minche, Kiawanga Magi, Azuki, Leanga Basse, Jebud Minche, Mamba, the Yomo, checked. Digdua and Biggie, the nigger some dodge in Davana, Dinana, Digdua and be some other, do I the down the lingo or what, Digdua and be something as a G and Digdu some banners, some Gaju, Jigminu some banners, some Gaju or what, Miji and Jing, I did in the Jiggies now, Jigdu some banner, some Gaju, Jigumea some banner, Midi Uzuya, doing out of bed, who call Langrua, or dinner, she as a Nazi that Jigumingo, Jigdu Mamba, the Yomo, Chagri, something, some down. And the niggas do us and by some time, Digalia and Garjorsen, or Danganashi, Mangbu or Simpson, the Chilean and Pichibo Sacha Dunga, Nadigan Mangbu, Nadigan Mangware, then Moban and Nayagi, then the Kusachiba Mangware. This Chasa, the Ni now at Nazi Dachin, Semjan Shanda Chasa, Nazatam Tower show was and big, Ni Nazin Yoadi, Shan Semjan Dunga, Yomo, shower show was and big, and Ducine, and Jigging as Yamlet some Davina. The Dunga Dali Chöpa Chagua, Dine some Davina, Sosugi, Sosolia, and the same Machuba, the just similar city, Papi Yore, Cavarin Gore, and denizing as the Kizima, Dongling Yamnaja, some Nadu Kabla, and the Niki, the Yamlin, Dunga Nawa de la Simja, Jeda, Similinalia, Mengana, never, didn't have power to me by teachers and Nazatiki, Nay Nazi del Minchin, Shandachas and Nazi le Charge. Murdu nearly church, Lutia, the same give us your shores and big Lucia some Dashavena, and the Dunga Darling Chöpa, and Delia, Lucine, Jiki, Sosugi, Gawapato, Gawat of Chimosago, and Sosugi, Semlia, Nazagi, Bustop, Gangadia, Mayon, Semlia Shishiba, Digalia, Sosu Gawapat Mebasava, you want to work. The nigger some night, and the kitchen was shower.
To give a further illustration of the second type of suffering, the patience of willingly accepting hardship, which is hardship that doesn't arise from outer sources, but from either one's own body or from one's way of thinking. Here we have all too much experience of illness, and we are likely to have many more encounters with illness and physical pain. So this, therefore, because this is something we experience and are likely to experience ever more of, it's useful and of great benefit to train one's mind in how to skillfully deal with illness and physical pain. Because if one is patient, or we can use an alternative translation, forbearance, if one is able to be patient with physical illness or forbear physical illness, one's mind is undisturbed and can deal with the situation in incredibly skillful manner. Whereas if one is not trained in patience, when one encounters physical pain and illness, one's mind will go in a negative downward spiral, thinking, why is this happening to me? My life now is going to fall apart, and thinking about all these varying results that will follow. I won't be able to go to work, I won't be able to care for my family. All these varying thoughts that follow from a diagnosis or from the arisal of pain. And I've even heard of people who go into such a downward spiral that they take their own life. So here this is a situation in meditation to prepare ourselves for, because it's very likely we will encounter illness and severe pain. A skillful way to look at this is, firstly, as a being in samsara, illness and physical pain are going to be encountered. Just like I'm going to encounter people who criticize me and get angry at me. This happens. It's not surprising. There's no need to question, why me? This is just how it is in samsara. So accept that one will encounter such circumstances. Secondly, that one encounters the circumstance is the ripening of karma from a past life. Now, that negative karma is being exhausted. And in particular, if I'm training well in cultivating virtue, developing my mind, then I can be confident that this is a powerful negative seed that is being purified already by my cultivation of virtue and being experienced in a far lesser manner. Moreover, or thirdly then, when we're encountering this illness, we respond firstly by accepting that this will happen. Secondly, that this is purification. Thirdly, that this is not unique to me. I'm not alone. Whether one knows of anyone in one's immediate circle who is suffering like this or ever has, you can be certain that throughout our world, many are suffering like this right now. So here, we engage in the practice of taking and giving as presented in the 95th verse. So we lift our mind up so as to ensure we're not getting overwhelmed in self-pity, but are aware that there are others suffering just like me. There are others in pain. Perhaps they're alone. Perhaps their financial situation is quite desperate, or they're in a country where there's not adequate medical care that they have access to. Now I'm experiencing this ripening seed. Through this process of purification, may their suffering be eased. By me dealing with this as skillfully as I can, may the suffering of others be eased. And all other beings who are not suffering this way but have similar causes on their condition, may those causes be purified through the purification of my suffering seed. Here, one engages in the meditation of taking and giving, as presented earlier in the 95th verse, imagining the suffering of beings that they are experiencing or potentially will experience. May that suffering imagine that suffering being eased and their minds becoming happy and joyful. And now, as we're engaging in this meditation on the basis of compassion, we generate joy visualizing others as being relieved of their pain and their misery. So in this way, of course we accumulate vast merits, but we lift our mind up. We're not overwhelmed with self-pity at all. Rather, we have generated joy through this meditation. So therefore, we have these three techniques that we can and should be cultivating now. And therefore, this is an important meditation to engage in, because we will experience these situations in the future.
아니네 자당한테 추림기 냠는 제다随便 냠는 제게 능한테 탈바다 탐지 캠비고 토야래 냠는 제고야기 제인대이 당아서 이미리 니네 양아서 탈바다 탐지 캠비고 봐서 마다바이네 지소나리아 안지게 시대용야다 안지게 정무용야 될이야 안 추림 냠내다随便 냠내디 인지미지 야바도 제고야 차기도와 근데 추림 냠내서 릉아 예수미 지게 내주 자오기는 지금에 선배 수림 송고자 수림 마송의 긴긴 안 저기 안에 지게 점내 날이야 즉 지소 날이야 강아 구마자데 수림 마송이 수림 마송의 긴지 구마제 거와 안에 지게 준시야래 류유관의 샹야 안에 지게 강아제야래 안에 즉 대수치 류하기 내주게 수림 마송 내주 마돈 바인자 안 디기토네 안 디리고 대성 아주 류가 이스미 내주었던 비 수림 송와이나 내가 가르쳐베네 샹을 고호다야다 준시야다 고소레존제야다 샹리아 즉 제엠다 체와제기 내수도 용마르와 지산 수림 송베 대수 오지 가루와 랑기 토네 잘리아 데니 마요디 수림 송에 대해 찾아가 제가 수림 송와이나 아주 미셔서 수림 송와이나 지소에 가려나 장무장샤야 다는 지기 야고야데 책으로와 다 출입 말씀이 긴기 안에 지고서에 조래 안에 구주인샤래 파수 지出席 주보자의 용으로와 다随便 냠는데 제마도 왜 긴기 가려운 것은 주보자의 진리지出席라는 파지등야다 마자다 주보셔야다 안진진의 대체도 随便 냠는 제마도 왜 긴기로와 안지 되네 인자 당한 중에 수rim냠네 제와야다 세베냠네 제토바이나 안에 지게 샹라 고골마다 레알 가르치나 정보 샹레 팬베 자와 용거자 다랑기 지게 제리가블이야 안 지게 수림 세베냠네 요바이나 랑기 계위 지자와 제도 깔레 카베네 데라 안 지게 셈 당도레 투바스칼 셈랴 안에 지셈 shum비아나 밥 자야 shum바드 마용와다 미션이 소슬야 지게 네버르제네 델야 콘로마라바 안 지 코노말라베딘 덴바다 장딩이 토네 안에 세세체투야디 차산디 용고를 지자니 장다 수dim님네 세대 수비님네 세대 가서 최케레말에 기시 멤버지다는 그 니네를 미시 수이는 거 수위 토리아 디 베쇼고 여바디 차고를 받아 지소라
This practice we've looked at now, that of patience, and the second that we looked at last week, ethical restraint. These have great value for us to train in because every day we encounter so many circumstances where we have an ethical outlook or not, a mind that is disturbed or undisturbed. We have innumerable circumstances every day where we can strengthen our habituation to ethics and to patience. It's particularly the ethical restraint of developing an attitude of a determination to bring no harm to others, which is experienced as ensuring our mind does not become afflicted, and thereby we don't harm others through our way of thinking, and thereby not through our verbal communication or our physical interaction. But all the harm we observe in the world, whether it's conflict within a home or between communities or nations, all acts of dishonesty and deceit, taking advantage of others, all come from a lack of ethics. When we observe this, we should use it as motivation to strengthen our ethics, as well as our compassion for beings acting in ways that will cause them to suffer ever more. And moreover, the acts of aggression and many others come from not only a lack of ethics, but a lack of patience. When we observe conflict, for example, remind ourselves, this is an example of action from a mind that has not cultivated patience sufficiently. And use this to add to one's determination to cultivate patience within ourselves. If you emphasize these two trainings, as your mind transforms, you'll be able to live your life with far greater ease, with a mind that is with ethics, ever less disturbed by the afflictions, and patience too. The mind stays undisturbed, no matter what the source of adversity. And thereby, you'll be able to live ever more in accordance with your heartfelt values.
Dine zadang diring Chik Soviet Sadi, Tanga Assembly, Sobo Congress, Gom Japche, Tanga Sobo Congress, Gom Jadida, Jibuti, the Misuji Medical Letter, Nekan Kemen, Delia, Sobo Chicken also Commissadi, Park, Konomaladi, Chesio Marwa, Tanga Tambo, the Cross, the Teddy, Mason Singaz, Dondala, Nanazugi. 미션지 직수비 남상한테 파 직수마다 직수 파라야지 나중에 직수라야 되는 제데 검실을 맞서는 예만 망보시 예대 반사 디고 레로로지 차되게 파직 직 셈마추버지 돼야지 검시시라 매반자 디트 스칼레 하러 제거로 당한주디 검제비스도 서버 공구여스디 당한주도 신되지네 내신을 되는 제반은 갈때 막 콜랑이 아 선배기 삼다야다 다직 미디기다 소소게 녀비기서 게디나 소사강하다 제한주변에 되는지는 제대로 즉 파콜랑이 매 선배 삼다 다 셈제다 미다 수수이나다가 감숨기 셈제는 소소 직부체 차상 말아야 시시 땅하다 생활은 녀비기 말아 녀다 땅하다 말아 소주비더니 제배는 게즉 공르랑미아 세베 셈축메 세베 삼다시다 디팔야 ang이 펜비래 펜은 펜비게 자오트투가 지긴 파 뇌비게 잡라 파 뇌베서랑이 펜비 추뇌베기나 파 렌지 펜비 토는 시기 잠바데 닝지에 세메 닝지 공미하다 안디토라 안 닝지 공베 토네 코로리아 펜비게 자와 가레 투투이 투비 토는 게 지긴 셈비게 근데 이제 도시네 견주의 제 마신배 돈의 견주배나 파 니지지 니지톤의 그런 그 그런 노트 삼로 노트들이 방에 쓰시시시 매버스 투바 지기 인생비게 삼다 고미하게 되는지나 선배 되니게 삼다 제가 전바대 시신 된제 되니게 투 마투 되기 인생비게 삼다데 도시의 야내 야도 삼다 고미하디가는 수배 공부하세요로 어디나신 당하나 저기 지게 현재 펜피게 계획 자와 가르주나 당아 류다 셈간의 시간을 유변에 내 강아들 맞은 바지 강아들 파 동현제제 냠는 지기나 선배 삼다데 등이 자데 야네 야도 삼다데 동아 달링의 수비 공부하셔야지로 다데네서 다 양지 전주sem다 인제당 동유튜브에 쉐라라서 받아 상기 연대나 데니게 연대 삼다데 데니게 삼다데 어때 연대 빠도면 봐 데니지 데니게 냠는 제 배마스 공부다 깔려하고리 고급하고 시우랴 다 상계단 전주sem바 탐지게 데니시 냠는 난 거래 얘기야 냠는 지기야 선배게다 지디기 연대디기 파하고 와제 연대는 하고 내는데 연대지 되는 여러 와서 삼다 되니게 연대 되는 여바딩이 냠는데 야네 야도 지야 선배기 두시는 삼로나래 야네 야도 두시는 잠바데 시진 된제 야네 야도 두시는 삼다 공바데 당한도 서버 공바해야지 디샤고 와다 되니게 삼로되게 잠바데 시진 된제 야네 야도 삼다베네 두시는 다베네 그 안에 직 되니게 땅에도 삼로대에 님베직니 되네 땅 지간주 장에도 갑라 되네 야시 제해야 레라라지 레라야 조르지다 안 되니게 제해지래도 되네 강아지다 제마 강아지 체베 내가 갑라나 저거 공부해서 남산 젠투 얘기지 진짜 젠투도 남산 가두고 제마도 내 가두 말와 진짜다 저거 검세지 아주 지구 되니까 되니게 제시신 된지 안에 야도 좀 따야 돼 자고 거다
The time to engage in these meditations is not when one is facing adversity, but when one's quiet and alone, can think calmly and clearly. That is the time to prepare our mind. What we are trying to do is overcome deep-seated, long-formed habituations by developing new habituations. So this will take repeated training over a sustained period. This we recognize from the outset, but also we know from our own experience, lacking in patience, being unethical, causes harm to us and to others. Therefore there's such great benefit, there's a great prize in becoming ever more ethical and patient. I encourage you to utilize this verse in your meditation, because whilst it refers explicitly to the one of the three types of patience, knowing that, you can afterwards include the second and third type too. Because this verse makes very clear, no matter who, or how many people, or in whatever manner, whatever I'm on the receiving end of, I will only respond in one way. May I help them in response to their harm. Whatever that harm is, and whomever we receive it from, may I only help them in response to their harm. And train in the meditation, as the 3 points I mentioned earlier, again and again, having this conclusion very clear in your mind. May I only respond, may I only help them in response to their harm. And the way, and part of this training, is to be very clear of the role of compassion. The way to relate to the harm from someone else, so the first type of patience, which is in disregarding harm from others, is with compassion, understanding where they're coming from, which is a place of afflictions. So with compassion arising within one will be able to respond with wisdom in response to their harm. Moreover, we need to rely on mindfulness and introspection, not only in the meditation, but in our daily life. Because as we become more skilled utilizing mindfulness and introspection and meditation, and we start to quieten our life, as we go about our daily activities, we be aware of our mind. Then, especially if we prepared in meditation for a difficult encounter we know we have coming, we watch our mind, utilizing mindfulness and introspection, and when afflictions start to arise, apply out the antidotes that one cultivated in meditation. So too, with the second type, the patience of willingly accepting hardship, whether it arises from our body or from our own way of thinking. Utilizing mindfulness and introspection, be aware of the arisal of hardship and deal with that skillfully in the way that one has prepared in meditation. And also here, one can utilize compassion in relation to oneself, accepting where we are, but being ever more skillful with how we deal with either physical illness or the arisal of our afflictions. And then in the meditation, conclude with meditating on the patience dealing with the Dharma, reflecting that on the benefits of the varying topics, as well as how fortunate we are. And therefore, any hardships that one encounters are insignificant compared to the great benefit that will be attained through persevering. So in this way, one trains, does so repeatedly over a sustained period, utilizing mindfulness and introspection. And moreover, in each occasion where one relies on patience, recognize one's success, rejoice in that, and use this virtuous mind of rejoicing to commit to continue one's training. And in this way, one becomes ever more patient and deals with life ever more skillfully.
shukshimbo suyende ke shukti yane yangdo jangudo mado sarjingi jang den jiktin shukshimbo chayamindo wado dedene ji yane yangdo rodi dedene laqwada gangbada be dokdo chim shukshimbo chaydo di nanshin subul ya du sin jeba nanshin ha semle pa du sin komne yane yangdo du sin mudu je kaze kombane ko yarge juyo ba de chagoro dine zata ngarang zebe ngarang chasare da 니 교환을 지고 말해야 돼. 나라 그거랑 찾아 집어와. 세상을 찾아 두스제고로다 두시 안에 양도 두스 공부해야 돼. 나 교환을 지고 말 저병을 찾아 되고 집어래.
Just like someone who's determined to increase the strength of their body will engage in various exercises at home or at gym, they know that doing it sporadically won't have much impact. They know they need to train repeatedly over a sustained period. So too with our mind. So I have the great hope that all of you will make efforts in these trainings on ethics in particular and patience in particular, on these two in particular. And I make the commitment from my side to continue to train in these, because these trainings we need to cultivate ever more deeply within us, so that we can eventually perfect all these trainings So I make that commitment, and I hope that you too, from your side, can train in these repeatedly over a sustained period.
All right. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.